Welcome back. Thanks for staying on board. John McGinness with the KFBK News Radio, live everywhere in the iHeartRadio app and your smart speaker. There's always more news when you're looking for silliness coming out of the state of California and failed leadership. And now the latest is the strange COVID payments actually making their way into the affluent. That's right. Food stamps, EBT benefits going to affluent families. And we've got a guest to talk about it, Lanhee Chen, who, full disclosure, is a candidate for state controller, who has my profound endorsement. Dr. Chen, welcome to the conversation. What can you tell us?
Well, Sheriff McGinness, great to be with you again. This is another example of a lack of accountability in the state of California. You have the state sending, which is a combination, it appears, of mostly federal, but also some state money to households, regardless of income, $1,700 per child, essentially these cards that are debit cards that can be used at supermarkets and other food outlets. And it's going to, as you noted in your introduction, families regardless of income. So you have families in very, very high income areas. And the report actually we saw came out of San Diego County, places like Carlsbad and Encinitas, very, very nice neighborhoods. Yeah. Children getting these benefits regardless of income, using them at Whole Foods and throwing parties and buying sushi. And that's not what they were intended for. They were intended for families who really need the help. And here another example we have of the state sending money to people and really having no accountability for it.
Can you begin to fathom in your wildest thoughts what would motivate people who are charged with the responsibility of properly administering these programs to sufficiently turn a blind eye to the extent that this kind of thing can become, frankly, not an exception to the rule? I've heard of a family quite wealthy up in Ventura County, out of San Diego, obviously. But the same thing, has school-aged daughter, affluent family, very, very, very well off, and their 13-year-old daughter got an EBT card with a $300 balance on it. So some things you understand differences of opinions in terms of how things get prioritized. But this is absolutely per se indefensible. Can you possibly come up with a theory for me as to why this is allowed to occur?
It's a fundamental lack of accountability. There is nobody in Sacramento blowing the whistle. There is no watchdog. And to the extent that anybody should have exercised some kind of oversight, that person's either asleep at the switch or doesn't want to do it because they're kind of a go-along, get-along kind of culture, unfortunately, too often amongst our statewide elected officials and in our legislature. And frankly, what's needed, this is why I'm so passionate about the office of controller and why I'm seeking it, and that is because I believe we need a watchdog that is going to identify these challenges. By the way, the minute we started to hear about this, someone should have stepped up and said, You know what, maybe we should stop the payments and investigate it. How do you think we got to $20 billion in fraud in our EDD program, the unemployment insurance fraud debacle we heard about last year? It's because nobody stood up and said, hey, we got to stop and we got to see what we're doing. We got to make sure we have the right processes in place to ensure that we aren't sending money to people who don't qualify for programs or frankly shouldn't be getting it, because there are a lot of families in California who do need it. And the reality is they're not getting it because of the problem, the systematic fraud, the systematic abuse that we see, not just in this program, but many others. So I think it's because we don't have accountability. We just don't have anybody up there who says, listen, you've got to stop and take note.
You know, you uttered a phrase that I don't know that I've ever heard before. Passion for the controller's office, or words to that effect. I don't think that's a ubiquitous concept. Very few people harbor that. So I'm glad you do. And honestly, I was going to say, and you mentioned it, but when you think about this extraordinary giveaways of taxpayers' precious resources that this debacle represents, the only thing that could make it worse is the fact that you had people lined up legitimately who had been on a compulsory basis paying into the EDD benefit fund. Then their businesses were shuttered by the state of California per COVID, and they could not get the resources. So, I mean, what could make it worse than, I mean, I've heard the number as high as $30 billion in terms of the ill distributed funds. This is it's just shocking and appalling. And if you look at the areas where the state of California is not spending money to engage in, I think, the investment of fundamental resources for infrastructure and so forth, maintaining the roads, maintaining appropriate correctional facilities to deal with people who misbehave, and we certainly have them. Just if the precious resources were more strictly administered, it seems to me that we could probably address a lot of those challenges without having to dig deeper into the taxpayers' pockets. It's as fundamental as that, isn't it? Is it not?
Something you said was very telling, which is you called them precious resources. You and I see them as precious resources. I think many Californians see them as precious resources because it's money we earn, and then we send some percentage of it to Sacramento in trust and confidence it's going to be spent the right way. But unfortunately, it's not. And part of the reason why is because too many Sacramento insiders don't see the resources as precious. That's the problem. They see it as, well, look, I'm spending someone else's money. Literally, the reaction I've gotten, John, when I talk to people about some of these challenges we face is, well, this is rounding error. $10 billion is rounding error. Why are we worried about $10 billion? Here's another example. $74 million in the Medi-Cal program going to deceased persons. Well, that's just rounding error.
Yeah.
That kind of attitude, I'm sick of it. I'm really sick of it.
I am honestly repulsed by it, and I'm thrilled to know that you are, because you have the passion for it and the interest, and you also have the intellect, I think, to approach this. I have concerns still in terms of what kind of an organization you may be finding yourself walking into, but I do truly appreciate very much the fact that you're taking these issues on. And I don't know anybody blessed with a greater degree of intellect to address these issues and bring resolution. And it's again, the entirety of this, I think, is a message that so much needs to be heard. And my concern and frustration is largely based upon my fear that there is a collective degree of apathy where people are not engaging, not absorbing the information. So I want to help you get your word out as much as I possibly can. And I appreciate so much what you're doing, and we'll get you back on the air again real soon.
I appreciate the time. Thanks for having me.
Thanks very much. Lanhee Chen, folks. Remember that name. Check him out. He's somebody worth knowing and supporting. That's it for me, as you can tell by the sound of the music, but stick around because you have the lovely and talented Kitty O'Neill coming up next. She's got the afternoon news. I'm out of here. Have a great week, and I'll see you right back here on Monday.